Welcome to the Hear K Tell podcast. On this very episode, my special guest, Isaiah Baker, is going to talk about his transition from sport to career as a student athlete to working on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs to now owning his own business. And so, focusing specifically on how curiosity was the catalyst and not necessarily the ending, but the beginning of something special. Stay tuned. It's the Hear K Tell podcast. Welcome to the Hear K Tell podcast. My guest today in today's episode will focus on, yes, transitions from sport to career, from a student athlete at Holy Cross to Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, and to currently owning his own business at 1-800 Striper, Boca Raton. Please welcome my special guest, Isaiah Baker. What's going on, Isaiah?
Hey, Christina, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I appreciate you taking the time. I always tell folks that I literally reach out to people that have either come into my life for a season, 2 seasons, or 3. So we met previously at another stage in my life and it was organic. And so to have you in full circle, almost like what, 6, 7,
I would
at
say,
least
yeah,
5,
about 6.
right?
Yeah,
At least 5 years in between is a joy for me. So I definitely want to share your story, but I definitely want to get right into it. So let's do that.
great. Let's do it. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
So as I mentioned, you were a college student athlete. You played ball at Holy Cross and you worked for Goldman Sachs. And you currently own your own business, which is 1-800 Striper of Boca Raton. And we'll get into exactly what that is because I want our listeners, our viewers to understand those are some interesting transitions, but we all have transitioned from sport to career. What 3 words would you use to describe your student athlete experience?
Uh, I would say stubborn, to put it politely. And
Hmm.
I think that's a multifaceted word. It's meant a lot at different stages, whether it's, people telling me I wouldn't get a D1 scholarship and me being stubborn enough to say I'm going to do it, to, me being just stubborn and a lot with some of my coaches later on. But that would be one. Um, I would say role player. I was a decent high school player, but I really had to transition in college, and I think that has stayed with me in a lot of ways, where you learn to create value and bring value when you're not the center of the show. And I think that's a really valuable lifelong thing to have, to set people up so they can shine. Um, and I guess injured. Yeah, I was dealing with a lot of injuries. I've had back surgeries, knee surgeries. I have arthritis in my knees right now. Um, Put a lot of miles on my body. But what it teaches you, I think, and why I say that, like it taught me how to think differently about how to do things, right? Like if you're not as fast, if you can't jump as high as you could before, what do you do then? And how do you make up for that? So it brings a little essence of almost, creativity in a certain type of way, but like a craftiness that I think always really I try to apply and stick with to this day.
Oof, we're already jumping into it, Isaiah. You just dropped 3 nuggets that I'm like, that was question number 1. Okay. So in mentioning and sharing those 3 pivotal words, how did you transition into Goldman Sachs? Because that's not a traditional transition. Like most student athletes do not go into that field.
Yeah. So I shared the story on my Substack, but basically growing up, I came up in a household where it was just a lot of financial trouble. My parents lost their house in the global financial crisis. Um, I think a couple of bankruptcies. It wasn't great. It wasn't. I wasn't. We weren't poor, but we were, living paycheck to paycheck and dealing with a lot of financial strife. And it culminated really when my mom, who struggled with mental illness, lost her job and wound up attempting to take her own life. And I was the one that found her. I walked in on her, and I still, I remember that to this day. Uh, but I remember literally, prior to that, I was taking an econ course, in high school, and I was watching we were watching a movie called Inside Job, and it displayed, all of the people who had made tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars off the global financial crisis. And I just remember as a kid, watching that and thinking, like juxtaposing it in my mind with all the stuff that was going on at home, fights, crying, tears, uh, and just being like, this feels like just like a game of winners and losers, and I'm on the wrong side. And that stuck with me. Um, After I found my mom like that, I was recovering from a back surgery there. I herniated my L4, L5 vertebrae, and not that I was like a league ready player or anything like that before, but it pretty much evaporated any hoop dreams that I might have had still. So I was just trying to figure out what to do next. Um, and I didn't know the first thing about finance. My mother was a doctor, and
Hmm.
my father was a social worker and motivational speaker. So I just literally started reaching out to folks at our career development office at Holy Cross, to alumni, finding out where the money, how to survive.
Where's the money at?
Yeah, there's a famous bank robber who, when he was asked why he robbed banks, he said, that's where the money is.
That's where the money
And so I started reaching out, and to make a long story short, I literally cold called all these people and showed up on Goldman's doorstep pretty much unannounced, and I got an internship within their sales and trading division, um, and came back for another internship, got hired, and I was there for over 8 years, or
The
for eight
rest.
years actually.
Is it safe to say the rest is history?
We'll see. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Well, I asked you previously what three words would describe you as a student athlete. So, what word would you use to kind of sum up that chapter, Goldman Sachs?
I would say either like searching or curious.
Mhm.
I got in the door there, and I was coming out of a space from a lot of. I was moving out of a negative tailwind. I was running away from something. Um, and I got in, and it wasn't. I didn't feel the fulfillment that I thought I would have. I didn't feel the. Um, it never felt like I was still the person that I wanted to be. Uh, and there's like a lot to that. And so I spent a lot of time while I was there, not in my outside hours, trying to really discover who I was and figure that out. I mean, I used to do all types of things. I would do stand up comedy. I would do improv. I was in like the show. I used to go to writers groups, and really just trying to figure out what were the missing pieces to the puzzle.
Mhm.
Which I think being curious is a true skill that you have to hone, right? Like you have to know how to ask questions of yourself, and how to even like push yourself to ask more and to follow up and dig deeper. Um, I worked with that on that for literally years. Spending time making sure I was educating myself on different things, on history, on politics, on whatnot, because I wanted to be a more whole person, uh, and I knew it. I wasn't getting it through my career, and I didn't necessarily want to be just a Goldman person. So
Mhm.
I moved on. Yeah.
Gotcha. I hear that. And then we transition into this space because I think what was fascinating for me is to hear where you are now. And I, like some other people who are watching us and viewing us, I found out through just an article you wrote, like, wait, this is what he's doing. And you're currently in, you own your own business, 1-800 Striper of Boca Raton.
Yeah.
To get to that, to get to that point where you are right now, if you were looking back at your previous self, what's one word that explains where you are now?
Um, I mean, I guess if I'm looking back at my previous self, I think it would go back to that curiosity point.
Mhm.
Um, I'm constantly uh, I'm constantly asking myself, not only what's going on, what am I doing, but meta version, like, am I on the right path? Am I doing things? And now it's all learning, right? I'm in novel terrain in two ways. literally and metaphorically. I'm in Florida. I'm in Boca Raton, which is new to me. So literally finding out new neighborhoods, new streets, new people, new culture,
Hmm.
and then on a more metaphorical level or higher level, right? I'm no longer a wage earner. I'm an entrepreneur, and that is comes with a lot of different lessons. Um,
Yes.
and so wrapping my mind around that is just constant learning, and you have to really be open to things. You have to have a beginner's mindset, and I think the time spent trying to foster an innate curiosity was helped me prepare for that. Yeah.
I love that because it kind of ushers into my next question. Like, what does it really take? So our viewers are watching and going, okay, I hear his story. I'm tapped in, I'm locked in, coach. But they want to know, what does it really take to make it? Like, what skills and attributes are critical to separating yourself? And you kind of, you just pinpointed being curious, because I don't think
Yeah.
people really think of curiosity as something that you can hone, get better at, and then see the return on the investment in self. Like, you don't need to
Well,
wait for that.
I think I think curiosity is drilled out of us. You know,
Mhm.
um, I think maybe the biggest thing might be in the way we're schooled, but certainly through I would say media, right? Through um, general like consumerism marketing, right? You're not given a lot of opportunities where you have to create something for yourself. A lot of things are prescribed and sort of handed to you, and it might
Mhm.
even be under the illusion of choice, right? Like you can drink Coke or Pepsi, but it's not a real question of, I guess, to extend the metaphor of, well, what would I do? What would I ideally, craft that I would like to drink? Um, I think of like for school, right? You're sitting down, you're forced to sit down and memorize things for years. You have to raise your hand to even go to the bathroom, right? Like a natural function. It's really drumming into people's heads that they should be obedient and wait on other people to tell them what to think about and also what to do and ask for permission.
Mm.
I think the type of thing that it's the type of thing that is rewarded right through like a long list of credentialism, in the employment space, and even in employment, it's the idea is I will go and depend on somebody else to provide for me because I don't have enough trust in myself to go out and try to create value for those around me. And that's
Mhm.
not too harsh on that. I mean, I'm a new entrepreneur. I was an employee for 8 years, right?
Right.
Um, I,
You
somebody
paid
could,
your dues.
yeah, exactly. I'm not. I don't mean to sound egotistic or too harsh there, but I think you do have to speak bluntly about these things, even if you decide to go one way or the other. Because if you're not open and honest about it, then what for?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think curiosity is something that's drilled out of us, and you have to really self-analyze and try to dredge up. I think the ways in which you may have made choices in your life that were prescribed set paths and not things that you might have been able to build organically or ways that you would have gone if you would have gone organically.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I can't really speak for everyone, but I think that's been really instructive for me. And I mean, you mentioned making it. Like, I don't think I'm a I mean, definitely now. Like, I'm not. We haven't made it. We're a new startup.
Getting started.
Um, we're the furthest thing from making it. We're fighting day in day out. And I say we. I mean, me and my wife. Um, is the co-owner of the business.
Mhm.
And the best thing that ever happened to me.
Shout
Uh,
out to shout out to your wife. Shout out
yeah,
to your wife.
Taylor.
Or when you got married, you were the happiest guy. And right, you had a glow upon you around the gym. So shout out to your wife. Please tell me what is her name?
Taylor. Taylor.
Taylor. Shout out to
Yeah,
Taylor.
Taylor Baker.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and even in my previous life, making it is relative. If I had told 20-year-old Isaiah that he was a vice president at Goldman Sachs, he would have thought he made it. But there were people who vastly outperformed me there. I wasn't a managing director. I wasn't a partner. Probably wasn't even considered the best trader on my desk. I think I
Mhm.
performed well, um, but that's not making it. Or even as a college athlete, to be a Division I college player, right? If you had told 13-year-old Isaiah that, oh well, he made it, but what, I was injured, role player, bench warmer, all this stuff. There were people, all of that. So I never really think in terms of making it. I always think in terms of just progression and growth and also in change.
Mm.
So I guess the second thing would just be like hard work. Uh, I don't think hard work in itself is a necessarily like a good thing.
Talk
Sisyphus.
wait, delve into that a little bit more when you say it's not necessarily. What do you mean by that?
So like hard work is a thing, but I mean you can work really hard digging a ditch with a shovel or a spoon. You know, um,
Touche.
I think I think there's a lot of value to working. There's a value to working hard when it's necessary. Like in a lot of
Mhm.
situations, it's a sine qua non for moving forward. I look at my life's path where, I was this person who bought into, I need to go to this school and then I need to get this job and I need to do this to do that. I walked a pretty far amount down a certain path.
Mhm.
And when you do that, you naturally, it's going to take hard work to veer back to where you want to be. So I'm not afraid of hard work. My parents taught me to work hard by example, both of them. Um, but also there's a lot of hard work you can do that's a Sisyphean effort, rolling a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down. So I think you have to be crafty again. You have to have a little bit of I don't even know if I would say like street smarts, right? And I think that's something that we everybody praises hard work, but just because something works hard, doesn't mean it's effective. And I try to be very outcomes oriented. Um, so I work Wednesday. I was up at 6 a.m. and I was doing work all the way up until basically like 11 p.m. that night. But
Mhm.
that was hard work. Maybe it's effective. Maybe I just wasted a whole day. You know,
Right.
it's gotta judge based off of the outcomes. I think so.
I love what you said about progression because I think at times we forget that it's important to continue to progress. Like you said, you could push a boulder up a hill and then have it roll back down. The progression is what did you learn from that? How can you be more efficient the next time, given the next opportunity? And
Yeah,
so I think it's as again, I like to talk about student athletes who transition or just career changes, folks who have been in a space for so long, 20 plus years. I work for a company now where people are there for 45 years doing the same thing. And you're like, at some point, is it still progress for you? Or did you just they can I mean, is there curiosity doing something for 40 plus years? So you brought up some really good points. And I want to kind of again add that to the next question is oftentimes athletes struggle to figure out who they are or who they are outside of their sport. And we're not just talking about basketball, we're talking about every sport. It's cliche to talk about it on sports and here and there. You chose to become, as you mentioned, something different based off of your situation, your family, your surroundings, your situation. When did you know? And I know you mentioned about you saw your mom, you saw your dad, the financial part. You was like, I gotta get where the money is. But when did you know who you were and why you wanted to become him? And I want you to answer that from what you're doing now. Since we talked about the high school, I mean, we talked about the high school to college, college to career, but you
right.
decided to become something different now.
Yeah. I mean, the question in itself, I think, uh, when did I know who I was and why I wanted to become that person?
Hmm.
Um, I don't think I know who I am. I mean, I have core values and principles, um, but when I think of myself, uh, I'm not very focused on like roles and identities, right? Like honestly, like when you ask me the question of name things for words for each segment, it was difficult because well, for two reasons. One, I live very present focused. I just always try to hone in on what I'm doing right now and what can be done right now.
Hmm.
Honestly, that's the only way I get through a day. But the second thing is that I don't really subscribe to like identities and roles, because I think that if you latch into too many, or if you delve too deeply into something like that, it can be thought terminating with
Mm,
regards to you identify as X, and so you're almost like this is how X operates, right? Um, I have a friend Nico who's an actor, right? And so like if he was playing, I don't know, a medieval serf, right? He couldn't just be like, well, here, let me see what my iPhone says or anything like that. Like it would be he would be bad acting in that role. And I think in that same way, if you get too caught up in I am, a Goldman Sachs person, it's very easy for the next step to be this is how a Goldman Sachs vice president operates, and this is how he comports himself. And it narrows the scope. It puts uh, it puts blinders on what's possible, right?
mm, okay.
Uh, so, like you say, to like long aside and digression, but
We're here
I
for it.
I think when I knew I wanted to decide, or I decided I wanted to do something different, it's been years in the making. Um, in terms of, I always said I wanted to try something new. I felt like I really wanted to enter entrepreneurship because I wanted to honestly work for myself to understand
Mhm.
what that was. Um, you know, I had great colleagues and friends at Goldman. Um, but you do get a sense of feeling like, they're always going to, people, whatever firm you're at, is always going to extract more out of you than you can
Yeah.
put value in for, right? Like that just makes economic sense, to a certain extent. Um, so I really wanted to test the waters there. That was a thought for years. And originally, I was planning on just taking a sabbatical and figuring it out. But then we had our first son, well, our son, uh, and it just life changes, and so it became more of a thing of, all right, this I would have to have an active sabbatical or whatever that means,
Hmm.
and we came upon the opportunity with 1-800 Striper. There was a lot more stuff involved in the background, but we decided to take the jump, and I could say like it was this date or this thing that was the true catalyst for what made that shift. But really, like, it's an ongoing thing. And to be honest, if I went back to that date and said this was that time, oh, I had this meeting and I knew I was done at Goldman or whatever, I couldn't at that time have even predicted what it would
Mm.
be like being in this seat right now. And so I don't, I have a little bit of, I try to have a little bit of epistemic humility in terms of, I didn't know, I don't know who I am. And I didn't know
Still,
then,
still
but I'm
learning.
figuring it out. I'm learning. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Is it safe to add, and I read this in one of your articles, when you talk about when you say I'm still learning and just keeping yourself open in present time for opportunities, when you talk about the reflexive obedience to entrepreneurship, and
Hmm.
is that something that you like, again, that you've adopted? This is how you live your life, and really just trying to keep everything open and not being closed minded to anything that can come, that can come your way.
I try to. Yeah. I try to. I think entrepreneurship lends itself to that because you your eyes are just open in so many ways to what's possible when you're not really operating by somebody else's schedule. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's not to say I'm without constraints. I mean, I have more constraints now, possibly even than when I was at Goldman, uh, just between family and business and all types of stuff. But uh, you have, there's like a creativity that you kind of feel awakening when you make a big dramatic move like that, and you think like, what else is possible? Yeah.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
okay. What advice? Because again, listeners are like, all right, I've thought
Mhm.
about making that shift. And after hearing your story, what can I do today to kind of shift my perspective and pivot from a previous mindset to what you've shared with us in this episode today?
Yeah. I mean, I I know you said you, but I think you mean it for any the listener of this or
Yes.
the watcher. I don't think there's not a one size fits all answer for anything, and I generally try to shy away from that because I think it's just a road to ruin if you try to shove everybody into the same box. It kind of runs antithetical to what I was just saying before, where everybody is already kind of trying to be crammed into the same box of do this, go to school, get a degree, get a job, and work for 30 years, and then whatever, then live life. Um, but I think it has to be sui generis. It has to be unique to the person, and that's why I do harp on the curiosity. So I would just say like look up, look around. You know, um, there's so many influences today want us to be tied into a rote and prescribed path forward, right? Like they don't want you deviating in any meaningful way. You're given choices between what outfit to wear or what to eat to an extent. Um, but you're really taught to be fearful and mistrusting of yourself, I think, and others, right? Um, what else could really a learned dependence be besides a mistrust of yourself?
Mm,
Um, so I would say just be curious, have faith in yourself, and earn that faith. Work, like test yourself, push yourself, have faith in God. I pray now more than I probably ever have before.
As
Um,
as an entrepreneur, I can relate with you on that one.
yeah. But test boundaries.
Mhm.
Don't take it. I wouldn't say like as Nisha said, move with light feet. Um,
Mm,
the spirit of gravity wants you to be scared, wants you to play it safe, wants you to be sullen or tied down to things. But you have to have fun with what you're doing and not take it so seriously in a lot of ways. If I took it too seriously, what would I be doing striping parking lots? That's like and leaving a Wall Street job for that. But you have this life, right? We're given this
mm.
beautiful we're given this beautiful canvas, and it's not empty. It's not a tabula rasa. It's not a blank slate. We're thrown into life uh, in the midst of all types of things and family situations, economic times, whatever is going on. But you're still given the tools to be able to craft uh, to an extent what it will be like, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And to bring it all together, I think like that would be the one thing I would wish to impart on anybody is to understand that you can be in the real driver's seat of your own life and craft it to be something really beautiful and something that you have a lot of fun doing.
Ooh, let me find out. We need to get this on a T-shirt or something that says. Now, I want you to share with our viewers exactly what 1-800 Striper is, because I know what it is, but they may be thinking, you've mentioned it, like, what is it? Let's talk
Yeah,
about the business. It's important. Let's put it out there.
it's a parking lot striping company.
Okay.
So what it does is well, at its core, it's a parking lot striping company. It's technically a paint striping company, which means it literally is putting paint down on the floors of parking lots, of warehouses, sports courts, playgrounds, and turf fields, anything that you can think of that would need paint on the ground is what it does. my wife and I were looking for, like we said, we were looking to enter the entrepreneurial world. I originally thought we would, buy a turnkey business, and we wound up going with this, which is a startup, a franchise startup. Um, but we wanted a simple, kind of boring business. Not, and let me tell you, it's not. This business is not nothing about it. In my opinion, is boring.
No.
It's simple, but you learn that afterwards. But it really fit a lot of the criteria that we had set, and we made the jump. And so it has a territory down here in South Florida, centered around Boca Raton, between Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach. And really, we look to just service our community. I think it's, I was a derivatives trader at Goldman, um, and, creating a lot of value, quote unquote, in the capital markets, buying and selling things, um, but nothing tangible in any real way to me at the very least, right, or to anybody around me. Um, and it's I think a big part, a chunk of why I made the move was I was really trying to test myself of like, okay, can I actually provide for myself and my family, and by creating value for people on my own, not as an employee for some larger company or some larger firm, but doing something that people value that I do with my own hands. And it's a really, I find it amazing because I've been so caught up in, you do a trade, you buy here, sell there, okay, make money, slap hands, wash, rinse, and repeat. To go and you walk into a small business, you say, hey, I can do something for you that will create value for you, curb appeal, happy customers, happy staff, whatever it is, with a refreshed parking lot, with a new playground, whatever. And they trust you. You go do a lot of sweat. It's a lot of it's very labor
We're
intensive.
outside in Florida.
Yeah,
Period.
exactly. And then you finish the job and there's something real that's there, that's left behind, and they value it enough to pay you. Um, it's it's a really fascinating thing. But that, in a nutshell, it's a big nutshell. There's a lot of words, but in a nutshell, is what 1-800 Striper of Boca Raton is. It's a local parking lot striping company, paint striping company,
Okay.
servicing the area. Yeah.
We'll be sure to put all of your information so that folks can connect, reach out. Even some of our Floridians who are listening can just get right to you and keep it real short and sweet. Now, if you had to title this episode, Isaiah, what would be the title of this episode?
I would say crafting your own life.
Ooh, I like that. We'll say less. That will be the title of this episode. I wanted to know, wanted to make sure I understood. You dropped some nuggets, like a lot more than I even anticipated, because I'm like, we haven't spoken in how many years, but it doesn't matter. I'm always interested in stories. And I tell you, I was captivated when I read it. I'm even more captivated now that we got an opportunity to chat here on the Hear K Tell podcast. So thank you for joining me, Isaiah.
Thank you for having me, Christina. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
We appreciate you joining us on the Hear K Tell podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe if you're not already a part of the family, like, and definitely share. We'll see you next episode.